Hi, everyone, and welcome back to a special edition of the Driving Talk podcast. And this is in association with Driven Minds. We've got two very special guests on the show this week, and it's none other than British touring car race winner Ronan Pearson and his lovely dad Chris. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be on the show.
Hey everyone, yeah, thank you as well. Mega to eventually be on. Something I've looked forward to for quite a while.
Fantastic. And Paul and Max couldn't quite cut it this week. No, I joke. They're absolutely flat out with the day job. Max is obviously tweaking a Porsche somewhere, and Paul is as ever flat out working hard in the city to keep everyone safe. So I've got a very glamorous assistant with me this week, and a damn hard worker too. She is, of course, Katie Ramsey Gough. She is one of the directors for the motorsport mental health charity Driven Minds, which I am very proud to call myself an ambassador. Katie, good evening to you.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having us on. I'll try and do my best to be as good as Max and Paul. Maybe they can give me a scoring afterwards of how well I did, but hopefully I'm a good stand-in for them this week.
Well, I'm quite looking forward to this episode because in the past few weeks we've talked about some contentious things. We've talked about, the series issue that we had for the modified Fords and a few other series, and then last week we had the magnificent Chris Diamond driver coach on to talk about his career, but we also spoke about tyre stacks as well. So it's nice to get onto a subject that doesn't quite have me pouring steam from my ears. And of course, as I mentioned, this is the Driven Minds special. So Ronan, very proudly, you showed off the Driven Minds logos on your car at the Knockhill weekend. Thank you for doing that. And we kind of want to reverse from that. We need to go all the way back to the start, where you came from. We need to talk about your rise up and through the ranks, don't we, Katie?
Yes, definitely.
To go from the likes of the JSCC through the Clio Cup series, through the mini challenge with various teams, building your way up there to ending up on the British Touring Car Championship grid and then winning a race. So, Saxos, let's start off with Saxos. How did it all start off there? Was there a little bit of karting in there first? Talk us through it.
Yeah, to even sit here and hear you list all that off like that, it really is incredible with how short but also involved that the journey has been. Let's cast it back to racing the car, which was actually nearly older than me as a junior in the JSCC. That's when my car racing career began. But we did a little bit of sort of Scottish club karting, arrive and drive stuff that still, taught me a lot of the fundamentals in racecraft that I needed at a really young age. Funny story, and the whole thing is obviously Dad had a really terrible idea of taking me karting for the first time. And the minimum age was 8, and I actually was only 6, but I was quite a tall kid and quite grown up. So I was actually 8 for 3 years until I was 8 and able to then be legally 9. So that was his fault, and this is why we're sitting here now. But it's been some journey. The Saxos seemed like an absolute whirlwind to go. Again, really, I was delighted to carry the Driven Minds logo on the car at the weekend at Knockhill. It's something we've discussed for a little while, and at a point for me in my career where, mental health does actually need touched on, and something that through my whole journey is, I wouldn't say a battle is the right word, because it's not. That sounds really doom and gloom, but it's something for most drivers. It's always in the background, whether it's that you're struggling mentally or just having the self-belief that you can make it, you can make a career out of it and achieve what you want. Because for me, 90% of this whole game, I believe, is above the eyes. You either have the ability or you don't. And obviously in my case, I would say that I do. Sometimes what can hold you back is your mind, really.
I always find when someone, they perform really great at their home circuit, and I think, well, why is that? Obviously you've probably been around it loads. Obviously, you've probably practiced there loads of times, but I think there's something about it, about being in the right headspace. You've got friends and family around you, you're comfortable, you're relaxed, the pressure's maybe a little bit less because you know the circuit better. And that, I think, is a good kind of evidence of actually like your mindset has a big impact of, you've got your talent, but how much of that are you going to put out onto the circuit? And the better you are, the right frame of mind that you're in, I think that gives you the best chance of a good result. But like you say, particularly with motorsport, there's so much out of your control. So your car brakes, weather, circuit, conditions, everything can all play against you. And throughout that kind of journey through motorsport, as you're learning at a particularly young age, to have to learn, okay, some things are out of my control and some things I'm just going to have to get on with the best that I can. And I guess a question for both of you is, in those kind of early years developing, how did you handle those little bits, I guess, of trouble, failure, setbacks? How have you kind of coped with that?
Yeah, there's been plenty of that. It's that typical iceberg image that you see pop up now and again, where you see the little peeking through the sea, but people don't see what goes on underneath the surface, really. I've been really lucky and blessed to have so many people guide me and shape me as such. I wouldn't be sitting here without like Dad and many others along the way that have got me to this point. So dealing with disappointment and setbacks are part of the course, really. And it's how I deal with it, is to not hold on to it for too long. Sometimes that can be really tricky. For me, it's actually easier to accept when I make a mistake than when something goes wrong out of my control, and to almost process that, if that makes sense. Don't know why that is, but like for me, Dad always used to say to me, never make the same mistake twice. And to be successful, you're going to make mistakes along the way, and it shapes you, it makes you better. So yeah, don't know how we've actually gotten to this point. How we've handled it, because we can be different, I would say.
Well, Chris, I mean, when Ronan, was it a case of Ronan kind of coming to you and saying, Dad, I want to go motor racing, or is it something that's always been a love of the family?
It's always been there in the family. I've loved motorsports since a young age. My dad was he was a marshal back in the days of Ingliston and Edinburgh being a race circuit.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up sleeping in the back of his Ford Escort, eating bacon rolls while he was marshalling, because I was so young at the time, and I was up in the morning at 5 a.m. and heading up there for the start of the day, and I just grew an absolute love for it. We'd walk around the pit garages at lunchtime and things, and that was me hooked, absolutely hooked. But I never really got opportunities when I was Ronan's age or so, when I was 8, if you like. I never got those opportunities. Football was my thing because it was easy. It was easy accessible. But then as I got older, it wasn't until I think I was around 20 odd when I got my racing license, early 20s, and I didn't race until I was in late 20s. And by that point, Ronan was just a little lad, and he was hooked on it. He was the first one to get me out of the car when I'd come in after the race. First one there to say congratulations, or good luck, Dad, or anything like that. So there was always that love for it. We'd be waking up at 2-3 in the morning to watch World Touring Cars on the TV. It was that kind of, not obsessed, but just
passion.
That's what made us tick. We talked about it all the time. Ronan was always drawing pictures of his favourite drivers, and it was just part of the family. And it's kind of where it all stemmed from. Ronan started to play a little bit of football when he was 7 or 8 years old. And then the karting thing had been there in the background. And actually it became an issue because karting was a Sunday and his football was a Sunday. So it was like, well, what do you have to do? And Ronan being Ronan said, I want to race. I want the adrenaline of, racing rather than, scoring a goal or whatever else. He had that connection with it. So that's kind of where we started, and never did we ever think it would get to this stage. Ronan and I would be on the bankings of a British touring car weekend, or sitting in front of the TV every Sunday watching, and now and again we'd get excited by it, and I'd say, maybe one day if we win the lottery, one day we'll get you in a touring car, or you can go and do this. And never did we ever think we'd be sitting here now talking about it. So it's kind of started off with me, so I'm fully to blame for everything. And I fully to blame for it all. And I usually get that thrown at me sometimes by, well, this is actually your fault, you do remember.
Not from me. But it's actually quite interesting then, when Dad said those words there of one day if we win the lottery, or one day maybe that'll be you. I actually posted that on Facebook on the race week of Knock Hill last year, 2023, because I remember him saying those exact words, and me looking up to him with probably a bag of chips and cheese on the bank and it not kill.
Proper motorsport food.
And
Yeah.
they really wrong tune. I remember writing saying that our lottery win was actually being on that grid in the first place.
Yep.
100%.
Yeah,
That's
where it all came from. It just stemmed from that, as he talked about earlier on, the taking him karting when he was 6, and the guy looked over at me and kind of winked and said, he's got a bit of natural talent. Has he done this before? And I'm thinking, he can barely tie his shoelaces, mate. And at that point I thought, oh, okay. And then there happened to be a kart centre near us. It's not there now, sadly. But one of my teammates, when I raced, he worked there, and he said, "Oh, listen, we'll get Ronan down when he's 8. We'll get him into the cadet championship. That's what it was called, is it? Cadets indoors. See how he gets on. And within 2 weekends, Ronan's standing out with little trophies, and I remember thinking, oh man, this is going to be expensive." You could tell very early on that he just had this desire to win because he was not a good loser. So there was always that. Even at age 8, there was gloves getting thrown about and all sorts of things. So, he was determined to win, and we were determined to try and get him as far as we possibly could.
The karting side of things, I did a couple of karting events last year, and it's quite an intense environment. I probably think it's more intense than some British GT paddocks, for example, that I've been in. I think there's so much money and pressure in there. And then when you've got sort of kids, like you say, like 8, 9, 10 years old, and they've got their suits on, helmets on, they look a lot older, and you can see them getting really into it, and then they jump out of their car at the end of the race, they pull the helmet off, and you're like, oh bloody hell, they're a child, because you sort of forget when they're sort of going for it. But like you say, there's a lot of sore losers, I guess out there. But
I think just for us, particularly my fault again, we were very serious at it, and it was supposed to be something we just enjoyed, but I was proper serious about it all. We'd be there 3 Sundays in a month practicing. I'd be standing looking at the timing screens and, trying to coach Ronan through doing other things just to try and find a little bit of time here and there. And there's other guys just turning up, eating chips and cheese and having a bit of a laugh. But yet we're there, we're Ronan with these painted helmets, and, everyone's kind of looking at you going, these guys are a wee bit too serious for this. This is supposed to just be pop racing. But, it was important because, as you touched on earlier, it was the first step for Ronan to learn how to lose, because you're not always going to win, and there was several heated conversations or just complete silence on the drive home from these Sundays just because it hadn't gone to plan. But it was always a case of, well, how do we learn from that? How do we make that better next time? Because there's nothing worse as a parent than to see your child upset because, or down or feeling like it was their fault or they've made a mistake, when they don't know how to cope with that mistake. And it's hard but it gave Ronan the grounding to then go on and start in car racing at 14.
Well, Katie, do you know what that reminds me of, Katie? So we had a stat at the British Motor Show, guys, and it was it the percentage of times of races entered to races won in Formula One for Michael Schumacher? And you look at the great driver he was, lauded as probably one of the greatest. And what was the percentage, Katie? It wasn't a lot, was it?
I'm on the spot now.
I've put on the spot now.
I made this game for British Motor Show, all these stats, and you can match them up, and I couldn't remember any of the answers, and I didn't want to remember because I could play it myself over the 4 days. From memory, I'm torn between 2 stats. I'm torn between 12.3%, I think, and then maybe a 20 something. But people thought it was a lot higher. They think of the days of Ferrari and sort of absolute that domination, and then they said, well, remember he went to Mercedes and he came back and he had a couple of seasons
the early days.
Yeah. The early days. It's, and you look back and you think, I would say one of the greatest drivers of all time, and the win percentage being a lot lower than people had guessed at the show. I had loads of different numbers on that board, and they were picking out 50%, 69%, 72%, and actually it's a lot lower than that, but that's still an absolutely glorious career. And it's, I guess, of how do you process when things haven't gone right, and redefining success. So if a win's not in sight for whatever reason, okay, shift, and then how do you go, okay, what can I do to get the best result out of this race or out of this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it's you lose a lot more than you win, isn't that right, Ronan?
Yeah, it really is. And unfortunately, the bug, or you could even say drug, of adrenaline and the motorsport high comes from being successful and winning. So that's what keeps you going. That's what keeps you hooked, or certainly that keeps me going. More so nowadays, off-track success on the business front actually really gives you a sense of satisfaction of right, I've done this too, to even get there in the first place. That gives me the satisfaction that I look for. But yeah, it's when you join a championship as a rookie as well, you have to accept that the wins or any trips to the podium are going to be few and far between to begin with. Certainly, as a big fish in the mini challenge pond as such, anything less than a top 5 in result in my third year of that was a disaster in my eyes. And then you have to leave that and park that behind and say, right, okay, now I'm a complete rookie, one of the youngest touring car drivers for a long, long time. Getting a points finish is going to be a massive achievement. So you've got to shift your mindset on that front as well.
Yeah, I mean,
when you have, when you have multiple races in a race weekend, I find it from working in the club racing side, when there's multiple and you had a bad result, say in race 1, it's obviously going to be a challenge of, okay, how do you kind of clear that out of your mind, feel the annoyance and frustration, then clear it and get yourself refocused for going out into the next one. So how have you done that, and how do you kind of get yourself sort of, I guess, dust yourself back off again and get going?
Yeah, it's not been easy to do that, to get used to that too. It's part of the BTCC now. I showed a great example of that at Brands Hatch when basically DNF race 1. I'd been put in the wall. So I knew that the rest of the day was going to be a tall order, starting from all the way back in London nearly. And, we came from there to secure the reverse grid pole. Your day's never over. You just don't know if you can come through the pack in race 2 and then your magic ball gets pulled out of the hat, then it's back on. You can salvage something. But yeah, it's important not to lose sight of that sometimes. It's when the chips are down. We've had a few weekends, especially this year, where it's been hard to regroup and go again. And you just keep putting 50p in the performing monkey and go, yeah, this is great, we're going to do it again. And then you have yet another bad result. And you have to stand at a Q&A and pretend that life is amazing. You really are riding a wave. But those waves can stop quite quickly. And it does get really tricky at times. I'm sure fans would love to see what goes on inside a truck sometimes, or the actual conversations that I had, or the emotions that are going on, as opposed to someone that's dried the brow of sweat, put a hat on, and again painted a positive front on it. Because when you put so much in to do this, weekend after weekend, year after year, when it is your whole life, it can be hard to just shrug off the disappointments. But like I said, it's the highs that keep you going. So, and for me actually as well, with the victory, it changed my mindset a little bit. That okay, everything actually aligned for me that day. I did everything that I could, everything aligned, and if you continue to perform the same, don't change how you are, then it's going to come back around again. The next race could have been an absolute stinker, and it was. I was firmly brought back down to earth again. That whole next race weekend, I didn't score a single point at Snetterton, yet I'd been on the top step of a podium. And you go, okay, well, we've done 3 races, that's 10% of the season, but we're going to have another good race again soon.
So we spoke a bit about your early days. I mean, what a lot of people don't realise is even before doing Mini Challenge, you were a champion in Junior Formula. You know, you were Renault Clio Cup Series champion in 2019.
Yeah.
Did that kind of help you on your way up to dealing with, okay, you've tasted the success, but I'm sure during those early days, did you deal with any difficult days and think, maybe this isn't for me?
Yeah, I think actually when you're at a lower level, the results are the be all and end all. Whereas now, it's probably fair to say that they aren't always in the BTCC. I'm really lucky with all my partners off track that they're behind me every step of the way. And what we do away from actually going round in circles is what matters the most. The results will come by having those good people behind me. But at a lower level, it really is the spotlight's on you for people looking at you to see what young talent is coming through. and to really make a name for yourself. So when you aren't getting the results, you do start to doubt your own ability, and you can't afford to let that doubt set in. Otherwise, I use the phrase that you're a goal down before you've kicked off. You know, if I there has been times I've wondered why we do it, why I'm doing it. Am I actually good enough? But you quickly have to park that, because things will just spiral quickly.
Superb.
I think from a parent's aspect, just touching on that, yeah, there's been a lot of times where we've had horrendous journeys home, because we've always lived in Scotland, so every race weekend was down south. We've had some horrendous journeys home where we've questioned our sanity, questioned the money we were spending, questioned all sorts. But that's a natural, not because we doubted Ronan's ability in any way, shape or form, but you just felt you were never getting that break. You know, you touched on Clio series and Saxos. The JSCC was purely about learning. There was nothing other than just go out there, bring the car home and smile. You know, enjoy yourself. You're only 14-year-old. You know, just enjoy it. But we'd see other parents that were really kind of like
proper BMX dads.
Yeah, proper karting dads, you know, and karting mums and all, every shape or form. And that was always designed to be just to learn. You know, we were very fortunate to get an opportunity in the JSCC through other things. So, you know, we just used it as a learning curve, but it costs a lot of money. You know, we're starting out with very few sponsors, you know, people just helping you out where they could. And it was hard. It was really hard. But we knew there was an end goal. We knew there was a purpose to it. We knew that Ronan had an ability and a talent. So it was just a case of doing the best of what we had and seeing where it takes us. And then through a twist of fate in life, we were able to jump into a Clio series, managed to buy a very good Clio Cup car. And that's when it started to get very serious for us as a family, because you were more in the spotlight. There was more people watching, as Ronan said, to see how good you were, because we were beating the drum all the time on social media. But you had to get some sort of results to back that up. Otherwise, people just think you just want somebody to pay for your son to go racing. And that's not what it was about. It was about trying to get Ronan to build a brand and a name for himself at such a young age, because that's where you have to be when you get to British touring cars. You can't start that now. You have to have started that years before. So the results, the pressures of 2018, that was his first season. You kind of got a free pass, 16 years old, driving his first adult championship with some really good pedallers back in the day. You know, in his second race weekend, he got the pole position record, or qualifying lap record, at Rockingham, which was a terrifying track back in its day. But, you know, that was 16-year-old, and, you know, he was doing these things, and we were trying to just look, this kid's got something, you know. And then 2019 came, and it just wasn't happening. You know, I remember one race at Brands Hatch where him and Simon went into the last lap. Ronan was leading, a little bit of contact the last corner, and they went across the line, and I think it was like 0.0003 of a difference, and Ronan lost that. He'd led the whole race and lost that. And I remember falling on my knees and just thinking, what do we have to do to get that first win for his sake? Because I understood everything he was going through in the car. You know, I understood the disappointment. I knew how he'd be feeling, and it's the worst thing to try and how do you solve that quickly? And we kind of got to halfway that season, and we thought it was done. We thought the championship's gone. But, you know, Ronan had this thing about him. He's like, you know what? As long as I'm here, as long as I've got a good car under me, I can win races. And he came from like a crazy amount of points behind to win it. And that was a springboard, because at that point, Ronan's main sponsor was already talking to us about doing Mini Challenge, which is joining the TOCA package. So it was even more important that we had a good season. We needed to win that season to then have something to sell, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then COVID came.
Well,
So 2020 was the dream. 2020 started off as, we're on TOCA Championship, we're in the Mini Challenge, massive step, absolutely excited by it. And then the world shut down. So, you know, you kind of just felt like things just not going to happen. But hey, they did. I was working all hours that God sent just to be able to afford to go racing, to be able to buy tyres, to be able to do. And we were doing a lot of it ourselves anyway, to try and save money. And I'd be working in London, for example. I'd fly home on a Wednesday night, load a car on a trailer, and drive back down to Brands Hatch, for example, on a Thursday. Or there was one occasion we drove to Thruxton to drop the car off so Ronan could test, and I drove back to Leeds and then back to London to do a job. And it was journeys like that. You just think to yourself, am I off my rocker? Have I lost the plot?
Am I okay?
Yeah, maybe I should get some help. And there's a lot of people questioned why my wife and I sacrificed so much, renting property just so we could put all our money into Ronan's racing. There's people questioned it and said, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that for my kids. But ultimately, we could always see that end goal. And yeah, that was, we look back at it with fond memories, sleeping in vans, all sorts of things that are just great memories that we've all, it's quite a different life we've had through being, from the benefit of Ronan doing what he does. So we're very grateful for it. I'm just glad we came to the other side of it, because there's times where you find it's really difficult. I wouldn't sleep. There was weeks I would not sleep thinking, how can I pay for Ronan to go racing? Because Ronan would rightly admit he just assumed he'd be racing every weekend. There's 7 weekends of the season, so okay, in 2 weeks I'm out at such and such. But probably at that point I'd had no money to do it. So you think, how do I do this? I don't want to let him down. We can't afford to let him down. He has to be out racing. He has to be there. He can't afford to miss anything, and that's tough. And I wouldn't recommend that. And we'll probably touch on a little bit of that later on. But I wouldn't recommend that train of thought ever.
Yeah, I think that's the assumption, particularly when you get into that Toka package, that there's all that kind of money in the world that you've got to spend, and it's an easy kind of journey for you. And like I mentioned earlier, if you see sort of everything on ITV, everything's on TV, and it's great, and everyone's like, oh, what a privileged position that you're in. And of course, it's very lucky in a sense that you're able to race, but like you say, it's so much hard work and stress that goes into it, and all that kind of build up to try and get everything to align in the right way. And those kind of pressures, like say, particularly from financial, and we know that financial stress is one of the worst that you can kind of go through. And when you know that, okay, this person's got the talent, they can do this, but you've got to make sure that financially it can work and you can still survive. It's a lot to put on yourselves and to go through.
I mean, it is. Yeah, I mean, the first few years, it was pretty much all of us. It was pretty much us putting the money in. But they got to a certain point where I'd actually said to Ronan, I can't continue to do this for much longer. I want to give you the skills to go out and be able to find and speak to people and find the budget and just build a brand. And we did that. Bizarrely enough, the turning point for all of this was 2020, first weekend on the Toka package, race 3, Donington, and Ronan's car burst into flames live on TV. And that was quite a horrible accident, quite a horrible incident. But ultimately, it was a turning point, because even through lockdowns and everything like that, the amount of support that came out to help Ronan get back on the grid for 2 weeks' time for the Knock Hill was huge. And the work that Ronan put into that. And I remember him he'd come back from the medical centre and he stood and looked at me and he was in floods of tears and just said, that's my dream over. Thinking that was it, because we're thinking, how are we ever going to repair the car? We can't afford to do this. And we had that conversation, and by the next day, he was in a completely different mindset, where he'd spoken to a few people, understood that he had to give this one go, he had to do whatever he could to get back out, and that's what he did. And he managed to find the money at a real terrible time for the world to go racing again. And ultimately, he is where he is because he didn't give up.
Not giving up. That's a formidable mindset to have. We're already half an hour into this podcast already, and I think it's actually time for the Driven Minds Minute, which I'm going to give to my co-host this week, because Katie, I want you to tell the world a little bit about Driven Minds, and most importantly, why it's, particularly with the link with Driven Minds, why it's so good to have Chris and Ronan on the show.
Yeah, so we had a Driven Minds edition driving talk, I think it was last series, which I'll be signposting everyone to go watch, to kind of catch up a little bit more about who we are. But we touched upon COVID lockdown and the impact it had on people's racing and sponsorship money, and that's where I sort of found myself in 2021. I had 23 race weekends booked in for all kinds of social media, team coordinator, grid girling. That's kind of where I started. Always got weekends booked in, and then lockdown happened in 2020, and everything just got completely cancelled. And then even when things started opening up, I was non-essential staff, which was hard to hear. I was non-essential, but I was lucky that I had a day job, whereas a lot of people in the community that I was part of in motorsport, that was their livelihood. They were all self-employed, whether they owned a team, they were self-employed mechanics, or they were even drivers with trying to get sponsorship for the season. Everything just fell away, and the impact it can have on someone's mental health and their kind of general kind of well-being. So that's kind of Driven Minds kind of started. A group of us kind of came together to support each other, and we wanted to initially signpost to people in our community of you can talk about if you're not feeling great, you're feeling the financial pressures, stress at home, everything else. It bleeds into a race weekends, and race weekends can be great for us to get away from the daily stresses, but it can also be a great stress on ourselves as well. And the more we can kind of open that conversation up, the better. And then there are occasions where people have incidents on track, like you say, a big accident where you're rolling, your car's on fire, you're hitting into another competitor, and it's usually a couple of days after that where the adrenaline kind of falls away and you realize the intensity of that kind of situation. So a lot of our volunteers are mental health first aid trained, so they're at circuits and race weekends, and they're available obviously outside on our social media as well. And it's people they can contact, and they understand the pressures of motorsport, they understand the environment and the market that it is, and help you kind of signpost to ways to get help. And then, definitely having Chris and Ronan on tonight has been amazing. I think it's an example of true resilience in motorsport and going through that journey. And it's great to have the perspective of a driver, but also family as well. It's not just the driver's journey. Sorry, Ronan, it's not just about yourself, but it's the family around it as well. And it's hard work from everyone. And like we've kind of talked about, picking yourself back up again after either sort of things happening outside of your control, results that you hoped for that didn't go to plan, and it's how you kind of can rally around each other and feel the emotions, feel the anger, feel the frustration, and then go, okay, I've got a plan in place, how I'm going to pick myself back up again and not giving up.
Superb. I think that is a great Driven Minds minute, which was well over a minute once again, Casey. We're not going to narrow it down to a minute, but I don't care. Each one we've done has been absolutely fantastic. And Ronan, you actually touched on it earlier. And Chris Diamond, who we had on, he was part of the Driven Minds minute last week, and very much same as yourself. Motorsport is about 95% mental. You've gone from the lows to the highs to the lows again. You've really you go on that mental roller coaster. And I want to take you back to that high earlier in the year. You went from the low at the start of the weekend, and you're stood on the top step at Brands. And for yourself and for you, Chris, as well, just how good did that feel in the moment?
Yeah, still the highlight of a long journey, really. Yeah, ever. The whole race for me, still to this point, I've watched it back on the TV. We were fortunate to have the ITV onboard camera that weekend too, so you could see me in the car and whatever else. If I'm honest with you, I can't really remember much of the race. It's good that nothing eventful happened, because I can't remember half of it. I was just completely in tunnel vision, in a different zone, different planet, to get that win over the line. But then as soon as that checkered flag came out, it felt like the longest race in the world to that point. Crossing that line, almost like a big kind of sigh of relief. There was a monkey off my back as such. The floodgates were open. It wasn't a dry eye in the house, I don't think. It was like an out of body experience for me, really. Everything that you've worked for, everything you've put in, has just been made worth it with that one result. And that sounds crazy. 25 minutes of your life rides on the whole past, and for me it was, I had to deliver that. I had to bring that car home. No mistakes. Obviously I lost the lead off the line, and the fire in my belly just said, no, this is a real good opportunity. I can't let this slip. I need to get back into the lead and win this race, not just for myself, but for so many people. For a little while, it was it was like living in a different, I don't know, different planet really. Just being on a magic carpet, and it didn't really sink in for me until the following weekend. To be fair, I was more mentally drained, I would say, than physically. I can cope quite fine with a race weekend physically, but mentally, you've got that low after race one where you don't know what to do next. You're questioning why you do it and when are we going to get that break. All the stuff that comes attached with a bad result, especially when it's not been in your control. To then the half high of a not bad race, good drive for me, and it was a real good touring car race. Gets the juices flowing. That's why we do it. All that spiel that you give, and then the ball gets pulled out the hat, and then that kind of happy feeling of okay, that was a good race. Then turns into a level of expectation when you start on pole position. No matter what championship you're racing, if you qualify on pole, you're expected to bring that car home and win the race. And anything below that isn't viewed as a good result almost. And I hate losing places on the track. I hate someone overtaking me and me finishing further back than where I started. And it's just, it doesn't look good. That's what I think. So then you go on to winning the race, and then you are on cloud nine and buzzing. When that adrenaline eventually wears off, it just hits you like a train. It's really also hard to describe that feeling too. But yeah, I could talk about that day for so long.
Chris, in the garage, I bet it didn't feel like 25 minutes to you, did it?
Actually, I just take it back a little bit. I used to be a bit of a nightmare, and I got a bit of a reputation for don't go anywhere near Chris when it's a race. Don't speak to him. I've fallen out with family because they've asked me what the time was. Literally, do not speak to me. I'd pace up and down. I'd go away and do my own thing. Until that fire at Donington, and I changed my complete mindset, because at that point I knew that this could just disappear tomorrow. So, you've got to enjoy every minute that you're on this journey and feel privileged by it. So that's where I changed that. And I'm probably one of the most calmest people in the garage. There seems to be mechanics, team personnel, all kind of standing, kind of biting nails and kind of holding on to me, and all. And I'm thinking, I'm chilled. I've got every confidence that Ronan's going to do this. I'm not nervous at all. The only thing, you get anxious about it, which is a completely different feeling to being nervous. I get anxious because there's things that you can't control, as we touched on earlier. But ultimately, it's a strange thing, because my wife and I became proud parents again in March. And of course, by the time we got to Brands Hatch, little Maverick was still, how many weeks was he? I don't know, 7 weeks old or so. And I'd fought with myself all week about flying down to Brands Hatch, because Ronan said, I really want you to be there. Can you come down? I think, I don't really know if it's too soon to leave Mum and this, that, and that. But anyway, I was convinced. Someone said, Louise said, just go. Someone needs to be there. Just go. I'll be fine. So I flew down on a Saturday night. Was there on the Sunday. Got there, race one, thinking, why did I bother? Why did I bother? I'm obviously not a good luck charm. But ultimately, Ronan came in from that race, and I said to him, I always leave him, because I know I just don't even go near him at that point. But a wee while later, I said to him, look, your day's not done. Your day is not done. You have a great race too. That car's very quick. You're very quick. I've got every belief that you can put yourself in with a shout for a reverse grid. So just go out there. I remember saying to him, just go out there and do what you do best. That's what I always say to him. And he did. And he got pole. I remember standing, and I know Brands Hatch is a nightmare for starting on pole because it's in the dip. And I remember saying, I can't remember who was with me, and I remember saying, he's going to have the best start of his career ever to be first into the first corner, because that is a horrible place to have to get a touring car off the line. And of course, what happened. But everyone in the garage was like, and I was like, I know he's going to win this race. There was something about that day that everything just, as Ronan said, all the ducks were in a row. It just aligned, and I just had every confidence. And there was people in tears during the race in the garage, and I was probably the calmest one there until I made the fatal mistake of watching the screen and then realising the screen's on, it's a little bit behind, because I wanted to get on the pit wall and cheer. But by the time I realised what was going on, Ronan went past the pit wall and I'm running across the pit lane. I've seen on the telly giving it Yahoo and this, that and the other. But it does feel like an out-of-body experience. It didn't feel real. You almost felt like, is that allowed? Are we allowed to win a race? Are we, are we allowed to be here? Because we're just a normal working class family. Is this okay? Is this, and there's so many people from all the other teams, all up and down the paddock coming up and giving me hugs, other drivers, dads, mums, all sorts. And it was probably the most popular win I know for a long, long time in touring cars. Very much so. But yeah, I remember putting my head in before the race and just doing my usual kind of dad thing. Got caught on camera, just saying, go out there and do what you do best. And this is your time to shine. And this will be a turning point for you. And I'll just see you when you come back. And that's what I've always kind of said to you every time you've just about to leave the pit lane. And that was a huge turning point for Ronan. Take away the current situation, it's still been a huge turning point because it's presenting him opportunities that he might not have had before. So yeah, what a day. As a parent, it's probably, one of the proudest days of my life, but very surreal at the same time. And I think I've watched it maybe 4,325 times. I've got a favourites link on YouTube to watch the whole thing back again. So
I was going to say, is the Sky Plus box not about to burst into flames?
Thankfully, when you go on YouTube and type Ronan Pearson Brands Hatch, it's there. So yeah, it's been watched, and watched, and it'll not be the last time that he wins a race. I mean,
we certainly hope not. I mean, up to that point, Chris. I mean, Katie, you'll probably want to ask this question with me. You'll be thinking the same thing. If there was someone else came up to you and said, I've got a lad wants to get into motorsport, wants to do exactly what Ronan did to you, what's the advice that you would give to them on starting out on the racing journey?
I think you can't go into motorsport with your eyes closed. You have to educate yourself very quickly on the do's and the don'ts, who to trust and who not to trust. I've learnt a lot of expensive lessons, which I'm happy to share with people if they ask a question. I think you have to go into it with the mentality of you're doing it to enjoy it. First and foremost, do this to enjoy it and not set too many expectations on anyone. I would do your homework. Find where you can do this at a reasonable cost, which is not going to mean you're eating beans and toast for a month. Don't get too drawn in by what people say. Everyone will make you feel like the next Michael Schumacher because they want your money. They'll make you feel like you're the best racing driver they've ever seen coming through the ranks and come and join our team and this, that and the other. Just keep your eyes open. Don't be naive about anything. And ask questions. Ask lots of questions. Question everything, basically. But do it for the right reasons. Don't do it because you want your child to go racing. Do it because they want to go racing.
Yeah, and
That's a big difference between the two.
What kind of sticks out to me as well as you've both been speaking is the ability to kind of learn. So even just talking then about how you'd be unable to anyone speak to you while Ronan's out in the car and no one go near me, no one touch me, no one ask me anything, to being so calm and relaxed. And I think it's that, like you says, of you learn from mistakes, you learn what works and what doesn't work, and be able to adapt to that, to get the best out of yourself and out of others around you. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think I lost, I'm being very honest on a few occasions, I kind of lost sight of why we were doing it and lost sight of the fact that, we should just be proud, whether your son or daughters are, winning races or not, they're on that grid.
Yeah.
And they're doing something that there's lots of kids in the world would love to do, but never get the opportunity. Mm-hmm. So why see it as something that's a negative? I think I touched on it before, Katie, that it's our bubble away from our daily life. Mm-hmm. And it's a stressful bubble. So when things don't go well, you don't resent it, but you start to get a bit annoyed because your happy bubble is not so happy. How do we make that happy again? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I kind of did lose sight of, there was a kind of almost a desperation within me and Louise to get him to touring cars, and I remember sitting at Knockhill in 2021 and saying, we have to do this next year. We have to make that step because I've got this feeling that things are going to you know, the opportunities might start to dwindle away. You know, and the rest of that is a different story for another day. But, you know, I did lose sight of why we were doing it. But after that day at Donington in 2020, there was a complete change in my mindset towards, you know, it could end tomorrow, so let's just appreciate it while it's here, you know, and not get to a stage where we go, I wish I'd enjoyed that more, because that was good, you know. So you do have to have that, certainly.
And obviously, we go from the highs. At the moment, everyone knows what's happened. You've had the split, and dealing with a championship that's got such a high profile in British motorsport and probably the world. Certainly quite the world following as well. It's now on TikTok, so it's out there on different social media platforms. I mean, Chris as well as Ronan dealing with that in the highs, and then unfortunately with the lows when you get a bad weekend, bad results, and then what's happened, you know, unfortunately you have split and you're not in the seat for the rest of this year. How tough has that been, dealing with that?
Yeah, it's been a really difficult time in my life that I didn't expect to come as such through, I wouldn't say my fault in the slightest. You know, when I stood in the top step of that podium on the 12th of May, I didn't expect to not be finishing the season. No driver sets out to do that, so or to complete a partial season. So yeah, it's there's been some tough days. There's been days where I've not wanted to talk about motorsport at all and just try and take myself away from it. But that's equally hard when it's your full-time job and everything that you do.
Yep.
It really consumes you. I'm in a good place now. Initially, it was about being really positive, you know, put the announcement out. Videos like that were pretty easy to do. But actually, when you have any, well, for me, when I have any time, either myself, to just sit and think about things, that's when it can creep up on you. And that happened. I'm not afraid to admit that. In the lead up to the Donington Park race weekend, where we should have been, I found myself not travelling down, and all my emotions kind of caught up with me. The anger of where we're at turns into a little bit of sadness almost. But actually, it's about remembering why I'm in this position, and that actually it's not all bad. You know, it was my decision in the end, and one for the better. We've got the wheels in motion for 2025 already. Again, with everything I've learned in 17 weekends in the BTCC is going to be put to good use to come back stronger than ever. And it's actually been a really, really positive couple of weeks for me since some of my low days with the whole situation. And it's, again, it could have been really easy to have just said, I'm done. I can't keep doing this. And my next opportunity, my next steps are quite pivotal for me. It's not, that's just an honest assessment of where I'm at, again, with everything we've put in to be in the same position in, say, a couple of years' time is not an option, because I'd have to look at all my life choices, my future, and make a call on what I do next. But yeah, I believe that I've got another really good opportunity, and it's about taking that bull by the horns, making the best for me and all of us, because ultimately what I do as an individual affects everyone, family, all my partners that feel like one big family as well. So it's been about protecting myself and them also. So yeah, no bad result actually comes near to this kind of situation, this kind of feeling really. But yeah, it's for the better and in good spirits.
And did you feel any pressure sort of from public perception? Obviously, we're all in sort of various Facebook groups and forums, and you know, I find it particularly in touring cars that you have always people with different kind of conspiracy theories, and they try and piece together, and some of it is absolutely ludicrous. It's worse than F1 silly season.
Oh, Katie, everyone turns into Hercule Poirot, don't they?
They do, and they all got a friend who knows a friend who knows someone who knows someone, and you know, all that kind of stuff. Did you want to just ignore all that completely? Do you ever look at that stuff, or did it kind of add, I guess, to the situation and how you were feeling?
Yeah, Yeah, I wouldn't say any of it added to the situation, how I was feeling. Got pretty broad shoulders. The school I went to, 2 + 2 = 4, not 5. So, yeah, people can make of what they will of certain things, but in the main, in a percentage of response that I had and across every platform has been so nice. It's really made me appreciate everyone that I've got around me. It probably grew arms and legs and reached a wider scale of people than what I expected. The people that took time to comment or send me messages, and my phone exploded to the scale of what it did when I won the race. It seems like it's affected a lot of people, and that's really, really touching. So no, none of the keyboard enthusiasts with their own opinions would affect how I feel. I sometimes think it's quite amusing. When I came into this, people thought I was a spoiled kid, which they were completely wrong about. People thought I wouldn't achieve very much, and I was just another wasted seat and whatnot. Casting that back to 16 months ago, whereas that fuels you to make you prove these people wrong. And whether you do or don't prove these people wrong doesn't actually matter either. But it is really nice, the support that I have had and the people that have reached out that I maybe didn't expect to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, go on. I was going to ask the question with Chris. You spoke earlier about being calm in the garage. Obviously, seeing Ronan go through all this in the next few months, are there times where you kind of look on these groups on social media and just think you haven't got a clue?
Yes. I mean, I've always been part of these forums in a quiet sense and just like to observe. And it's an interesting one that I thought about the other day. You know, when Ronan won, there was, across all the forums that I'm on, there was one person mentioned it. One person. Nobody even talked about it. No, not a thing. And then, of course, the announcement came out, and I was expecting the worst. You know, I was expecting all sorts of comments to be made, just because that's the society that we live in, I suppose. But actually, I was pleasantly surprised. There was so many people actually gutted because Ronan has come in and made such an impression with so many people of a wider audience, which I don't think any of us realised. You know, to see the comments, to see some of the private messages that Ronan received on his Facebook racing page were just heartwarming. You know, it's like, wow, you know, these people actually have been affected negatively by your news, and it's, as a parent, that's something that we're very proud of. There is temptation, of course, when you see the odd comment now and again. You know, 1 out of a million, you always find it. You never just scroll past it. You always find it, and you're like, you know. But ultimately, we are part of Ronan's brand. We are part of Ronan's team. You know, we have to behave in a manner that's in line with him. You know, we can't be seen to be
having a shouting match with idiots on socials.
Absolutely,
I could say.
You know, there's ways and means to get your message across, but ultimately, there's been a lot of times in the last 6 to 8 weeks where I've needed to bite my tongue.
No, 100%.
Not just media, but around certain environments, I've had to really bite my tongue, and it's been hard. It's been so difficult to watch what's happened since May, to stand back and see Ronan being affected in such a negative way by everything, and not be able to help, if that makes sense, because you do have to have a bit of an arm's length to it, because Ronan's 22. You know, I can't go throw myself in there as Ronan's dad. You know, that's it's just not a done thing. You know, Ronan's big enough to fight his own battles, but we're always there behind him to give him advice and support him in any aspect. But it's actually a relief when the decision was made, and also to just be able to park it a little bit, because it's consumed us as a family for quite a while now. And just to get it was nervous time to do that, to make the decision that Ronan made, for it to be announced, because you know what the backlash of that's going to be. But actually, it's been so heartwarming, and I've been pleasantly surprised by the amount of people that have come out of the woodwork. You know, other drivers on the grid, other team managers, everyone coming, you know, and showing their support or just checking if you're okay. You know, it's nice to be in a paddock where people actually recognise that something's not quite right, and they're actually asking if you're okay. You know, just people we know, but not that well, coming up to us at Knockhill and just, you know, being concerned about certain things. So that's been majorly positive. So yeah,
I think, like you say, it's finding that positive side to it, and like you said, you've got plans for next year. You know, it's been the best decision, a good decision to happen in the circumstances, and you guys are fully aware of the situation that you're in and what you're wanting to do. And like you say, that people coming out and messaging and just showing that support, it kind of, I guess, counteracts maybe any doubt that you might have had at any point, or the conversations leading up to that decision of, is this the right thing to do or not? And then to see the positivity come out of it, I guess sort of gives you that further confidence of, yeah, this is good now, and kind of you get re-energized, I guess, by that.
Yeah, 100%. Again, it's some points have been positive. To people probably view me as a really, bubbly, positive character, but actually, in the face of it, with the situation, when you feel like everything you've worked towards is going down the pan, it's hard to continue to be that guy. And in our environment, where the first 3 to 10 seconds of a video on your socials has got to grab someone for them to keep watching it.
Mm.
You know, it's really hard to keep being like that and putting on a face essentially on camera. And then you always get the ones that feel like they're entitled to know what's going on as well. That can be quite tricky to manage too in situations like this. But yeah, again, a big thank you to everyone for all the support.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, social media, because it's something that we weren't really too aware of when we started out on this journey. But you know, overnight, going from mini challenge to British touring cars, it exploded. You know, it's everyone then wants to have an opinion of it. It's like football fans almost pay their money and think they can just throw abuse at everyone, and it's accepted because that's just part of the game. But it's not really.
Yeah.
You know, social media's you've got to be so careful with it. And, you know, just going back to that point earlier, there's times where you start to write a message. You write it, you go, no, I can't write that. You know, backspace. And it's the same with, it's an odd thing, because when Ronan does well, gets a podium, wins a race, you know, everyone's on the message. Everyone's there. Your phone just blows up. My phone, my wife's phone, Ronan's, just goes mental. When things don't go so well, not silence. You think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
actually, you kind of need that support at that point, rather than the other points. You know, you need people to be messaging and showing support in this. But you know, when things don't go so well, it's a strange thing to just have complete silence almost.
Yeah, there has been weekends like that where you don't hear from anybody when it doesn't go well, and that's just seems to be a general trend. Really, it's not just been one occasion, and you think, all right, okay, you know, it's not. There's, again, not that people do it, but jumping on bandwagons is something, you know, look at Oasis.
Yeah.
I could not be monkeys about going to see Oasis. If anyone's an Oasis fan.
So you weren't in the queue for 5.5 hours cursing Ticketmaster?
At 8 o'clock on Saturday morning, I was still asleep, I think. Yeah, it's so, again, my announcement you could look at as a bandwagon to jump on, perhaps, but the feedback.
No, I don't think so, Ronan. Everyone has a right to put their side of a story across, I think, and I think it was a fantastic thing to do, because you said it exactly how it is. You sat there, we were like, it's not working. We've made a decision. We've parted amicably. You know, that's the way it's going. So I think, as well as being incredibly brave, because unfortunately you are then putting yourself out there to the people that perhaps, you know, don't put the best comments, or they for some reason think they have a right to know what the story is. You've put your side of things across. You're just going to say, guys, it's happened. Here's, you know, we've decided this. We're looking forward to 2025. And you know what? It might just it just gives people a little bit of a preview of, what's coming in 2025.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was gutted when you didn't get the second seat at Mercedes.
I know.
But you know what I mean. it was incredibly brave to not so much to put yourself out there like that, but you've had to deal with the high profile of the British touring cars for a few years. You've had quite the setback. You've made an incredibly brave decision, and you've owned it, and you've gone, yes, we're parting amicably. Here's what we're going to do, and then we're looking forward. And it's incredibly brave for you to do, and a credit to you.
Yeah, thank you. No, it means a lot. It's it felt like the right thing to do because it's personable. People aren't going to read a massive blurb of text really, and they'll just look at a headline and go, "Oh, right, okay, wow." But it touches the heartstrings a little bit more when you can put emotion into something and not just read a Facebook post. So yeah, straight away I knew that was the best thing to do. Best plan of attack.
I think it's good, I think, for other drivers, who are, obviously in different kind of areas of motorsport, going through potentially not racing for a season, not racing next season, or whatever the kind of circumstances are, to see a high profile driver say, yeah, this is what's happening, this is the impact on myself, and this is me talking about it. I think I'd like to think it kind of gives confidence to those who might be struggling in their own kind of racing championships or series at the moment, where they can go, okay, someone who can actually speak. It's not someone who's just putting one or two sentences together for an Instagram post and sending out. It's to see that personal side, I think, is amazing to see. And I think the more that drivers do it, the better. That things aren't sunshine and roses, and things happen behind the scenes, but it's how you process that. And it's, I guess we're all grateful from a motorsport community perspective that you can speak about it. It definitely helps out others kind of watching on.
Yeah, I think we touched on it a bit earlier on as well. I think Ronan did. A British touring car weekend is like no other that we've ever been involved in. So as soon as you turn up on a Friday, there's media duties. Especially if you're in a team which is high profile, big team sponsors and things. There's always the media demand, and there's always a timetable put out. Straight out the car out of one session, straight to go and do this. You're straight out of the car after race one. It's an autograph session, pit lane walkabout. And one of the things that I've always been blown away with, and I always can, every weekend that I'm at, I'll always stand and watch because I find it quite remarkable that Ronan has this ability to switch off. He can have probably the worst session, whatever it would be. I can't think of an example right now, but gets out the car, changes his t-shirt, puts a hat on, and then stands and signs autographs and speaks to kids and speaks to parents and does all this sort of thing with this big proud smile on his face. But actually, all he wants to do is go and sit in the truck and scream and shout at someone and go, "What the? What's going on? This is, and time again, he's had to be in that situation where something's not going well and he's had to go to a Q&A at hospitality, or he's had to, do something, an interview on the TV or whatever it is. I never had that ability. Ronan and I, growing up, kind of like, he's your son, he's this, that, he's so alike, he's a mini-me and this sort of stuff, but he's completely different to me. I raced and I could not get past my nerves. I was a very nervous person racing. This guy, you wouldn't even think you think he was out for a walk. He gets referred to as Iceman for a reason, because he's just so, like, middle of the road, never up, never down, if you like. Just takes it in his stride, pole position. Your first year in touring cars at Knockhill in the wet, how do you feel? Yeah, I'm just going to enjoy it. I'd have been a nervous wreck. I'd have been away crying somewhere in the back of a truck, not wanting to go out, hoping the race got cancelled or something. But I've always found that quite I think you have to have that ability to be able to switch.
Yeah.
I think that's more about mind control. It's having that ability to be strong-minded and to not let your emotions get carried away with you. You know? And that's a huge part for anyone starting out from a young age to come through and race. If you can learn that ability, then that's a huge
definitely
thing.
Biggest sort of bit of advice I would give. It's not easy, but just don't overthink things. Don't think about scenarios that you can't control. Just think about doing your job, and that's it. Everything else will just happen, essentially. I love it. I sit in the car you go around to the grid after you getting the tyres crossed and whatnot, and you have to sit there for what sometimes feels like an eternity when you're desperate for another pee. the grid walks are ongoing. You're up in the air, jacks, and trying to keep cool. And people have said to me before, what do you think about? You must be so nervous at that point. I really don't. I can't even tell you what I think about, because it's not about what I'm about to go and do.
And by the sound of it, you sat there thinking, God, I need a slash.
Yeah, sometimes. Or I'm a number one that I've actually just had to get on with this in the seat that he's going to have to get into. It's easier just to not think about what's about to unfold. You've done all your prep, so as long as you've prepared as you should, then what have you got to worry about?
Yeah, and if, particularly my sort of career in motorsport, obviously started grid girling and then doing all the kind of bits and pieces. But when I'm stood on the grid, and I always like look at my drivers and see their facial expressions, and you've either got deer in headlights of and overthinking, or you have the ones that are sat back, just kind of pitching a circuit in their head, kind of relaxing, chilling out, and just like you say, not putting that pressure on, because the minute you do that, I guess it adds the extra difficulty, I guess. And I read something in one of those Facebook groups a few weeks ago about how to start a touring car off the line, and even partly on the paragraph, I got myself all mixed up and confused and thought, thank God I drive an automatic. I don't have that stress because there's no way I could do it. So imagine sort of race nerves, the pressure on wanting to perform, and then actually having to get the freaking car to actually move off the line. Must be a lot.
Katie, I get it wrong, Katie, and I do rolling starts in the modified Fords. It happens. It's but yeah, I mean, obviously with the hybrid and everything, I mean, how many buttons have you got to press? Have you kind of got to do this thing? You've got to pat your head, rub your tummy, press the hybrid, release the brake, do all of that. Yeah. Oh, by the way, and you've got 30,000 spectators looking and ITV4 cameras.
Yeah, and an engineer to talk to.
Yeah,
so at least that aspect, you don't feel like you're on your own because there's someone to talk to. But yeah, again, you get to a point where when I stepped up, it was all these things become subconscious, like your hybrid deployment. You work out when that's got to be across a weekend, and again, for me, it's like a breaking point. You just know when you need to do it. You don't have to look at the buttons. You don't have to look at anything that's been added to the windscreen or the door, like a map or anything like that. It just becomes second nature. And then, like for me, that was a big thing. Once you get past the hurdle of working out how to drive the car, how it actually operates, then you can focus on extracting the time out of it. Again, like coming in as a rookie, all that was mega important to have under control by the first weekend.
Wow. Phenomenal. I mean, yeah, it's absolutely great having you guys on. We are an hour and 10 minutes into this podcast. And I tell you what, Katie, we've learned quite a lot tonight.
Yeah, no, it's been amazing to kind of hear that journey through the motorsport that you've had, and it's the honesty as well. Like Chris, I reckon I used to be like yourself, if no one speak to me, no one touch me, no one look at me, if I'm in that high kind of pressure environment, and sort of having to kind of teach yourself of like, no, okay, let's learn from this. How can I kind of control the nerves, the feelings, the emotions, and going through the ups and downs of motorsport as well. Like we've all spoken about at multiple points. A lot of it is completely out of our control. It's like something we love to do, but there's moments where we absolutely freaking hate it. And you think, why on earth am I doing this? Papers in the air, I give up. Want to throw your helmet, even though you can't drop them because they're very expensive. But how you kind of get yourself kind of through that, and then still, like you both said, look towards next year. And I'm hoping you guys can tell us more off camera about what's coming next year, because we're both very interested and intrigued, and it sounds amazing.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's been really good to try and put everything into a nutshell, really. It's hopefully it's been informative for people to listen to as well. People can hopefully take something from it. But, everyone operates differently. Well aware of that. I'm one of 20 touring car drivers, and not one of us will do the same thing probably. So it's nice to be able to share everyone's experience, and potentially aspiring drivers or family members can take segments out of listening to different people, and hopefully that can mold them a little bit too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think anyone that listens to the podcast that thinks, I would love to ask a question, or how would they deal with this, or they may be racing already, and they're in a situation, or they need some advice. I don't know everything and such, but I'm always open to someone reaching out and just saying, because it means there's something bothering them to talk about it. And I'm happy to talk from a parent level or a family member level about dealing with the pressures of it all, because it is one of the best sports when things go well, but probably one of the worst places to be when it doesn't. And I think unless you're involved in motorsport or have been in some way, you don't really grasp that or understand it. And that's no fault of anyone's. It's just, you have to have been involved in it to understand the emotions that you go through.
No, definitely. Interesting. I was complete side note. I was at Brands Hatch the first time in a couple of years, a few weeks ago, the C1 Endurance, and I was like, I'm going to go for a week before I go up to race control. Got into the toilets, and then I had a flashback of crying in there the last time I was there, being completely stressed out, and I was like, oh, I remember this spot. This is that queue was where I was crying my eyes out and wiping my mascara off. Because you have those moments in motorsport where like things are completely going against you, and you just need to take yourself away and just feel those emotions. And like I said, Ronan, people handle things in their different ways, and just making sure that it's a healthy way, whatever way you decide to go down, feel your emotions, and then how do you pick yourself back up again? How do you realign and go, okay, I felt it, I dealt with it. How do I kind of move forward and go from there?
Yeah, one of the benefits we always had was the long journeys home that I mentioned earlier. You can have the worst weekend, but by the time you've got back to Scotland, 9 hours later after trailering a car, you're okay with the world again, and you're looking forward to the next race weekend. It's a great opportunity to either sit in silence for 5 hours or talk about what went wrong and how can we make it better. So, I think the point being is just talk, just talk to people.
Yeah, and you've never done a Jos Verstappen leaving Ronan at the side of the road after a bad race weekend, left him to walk home.
That's a long walk to Scotland.
Never.
I mean, guys, it's been absolutely fantastic to have you on. The one thing that struck me is not only to see the journey that you guys have been on, like I say, from Saxos to Clio Series, being a champion there, mini challenge, rising through the ranks, getting to the pinnacle. You've had a bit of a setback, but the one thing that I can see has never broken is the strong bond between you both. And you guys, to me, are the ultimate dad and lad racing drivers. I've met a few. Rob and Sid Smith from the C1 paddock, Katie. They've got to be up there as well. But both of you as a father and son motorsport duo, and it kind of reminds us all that motorsport isn't just about the driver. A lot of the times, it affects absolutely everyone around you. And I'll also reflect on the back that you were carrying the Driven Minds logo at the Knock Hill round, and very proud to see that on the car. I don't know about you, Katie, but it was one of those moments where it's like, wow, British touring cars, how cool's that?
It was that, and I think it's obviously Chris and I were in conversation around it, and it was that we really want to represent and we want to talk about Driven Minds. We want to get involved in obviously why we're here today, and I think that's been amazing to see, and we look forward to finding out what car the sticker's going on next season.
All I can say is the sticker will definitely be on the car. That's it.
Fab. Yeah. Amazing.
Fantastic. Well, guys, thank you for being on this special edition of the Driving Talk podcast. This one was in association with the brilliant Driven Minds. They are accelerating positive change. And from myself, Rob Lewis, from my co-host, Katie Ramsey Gough, it's good night from us, and it's good night from Ronan and Chris. Anything more to add, guys?
Just thank you for having us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and looking forward to taking this relationship forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for the support. Thank you for listening. Great to, again, pour things out across an hour and 15 minutes. It doesn't ever feel like long enough, but yeah, there'll be plenty more stories to tell over the next, hopefully, 8 years as well.
Yeah, hopefully a couple of those stories over a beer in the paddock.
Definitely.
Definitely. But from us, it's bye-bye for now, and we'll speak to you next week.